Hello, Blackhawks fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Four Feathers podcast. This is season 6, episode 10, Familiar Futility. Not a lot of good things we're talking about in terms of wins and losses, but it is always great to be on the microphone here talking Blackhawks. I am Ron Luce, joined by Mr. Tony Marchese at Tony on Tap. Tony, how you doing, buddy?
Ronald, I am doing quite well, my friend. Great to be back on the airwaves with you. I feel like you and I have not been able to sync up for shows lately, so it's good to be back on your line tonight as we get through season 6, episode 10. It feels like we've never really had a great Blackhawks team to talk about. We're going to keep talking about some bad Blackhawks hockey.
Bad Blackhawks hockey indeed. But before we get into everything, always reminding everybody, you can know when our shows go live because you can head over to the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. You can hit like, you can hit subscribe, and you can hit that little dingy-ding bell button because it'll tell you when all of our show goes live, including us here at Four Feathers Podcast this evening. Our friends over at the Golf on Tap group went live this evening. I was over on a Cubs on Tap show this evening. It's been a busy night. A busy night in the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. Be sure to check that out. And you can also follow along on Facebook and then, of course, the individual X accounts. But we are broadcasting everything from the On Tap main account. So at On Tap Sportsnet on X is where you can find that. Tony, it's a 1-3 stretch of games that we're talking about here today. You and Johnny nailed it in the predictions. Good on you two. Points for you guys, and we'll talk more about that later. But it started out hot. A 6-2 win over Dallas the day before Thanksgiving. The building was buzzing. An absolute all-time quote from Taylor Hall in regards to how that game went in the postgame. Things were looking up. Bedard ends the goalless drought, gets off the schneid. Everybody was happy. Crevier gets his first of his career. It all looked fine and dandy, and then shit went south post-Thanksgiving. That is a part of our title today. Blackhawks stuffed post-Thanksgiving, 0-3 in those 3 games post-Thanksgiving. We saw the 3-2 loss at Minnesota on Friday. That one has made it onto our list of games the Hawks are definitely going to want back, especially after a 2-0 lead. Then, of course, the 6-3 loss against Columbus on Sunday afternoon. And then we saw the 4-1 loss go down last night in Toronto. Tony, just kind of initial thoughts of this 4-game stretch that we're talking about here.
Hey, it started real fun. Real fun. That was probably the most fun we've had watching Blackhawks hockey. We were supposed to both be in attendance for that one, Ron. We both missed that game. I think our ticket plan, and we were talking about this on Wednesday night as we were texting back and forth. I believe our ticket plan only has 1 loss so far. 1 loss, I believe. And that's the game you were in attendance for outside of opening night. And I don't know if you've been back since that loss, Ron. So we're going to have to get you back in the building so you can enjoy some wins. That was the first game I missed on my plan all year. And what a game to miss. Paul's hat trick, phenomenal. Connor Bedard getting off the schneid, ending the goalless drought. It was just a fun night to be a Blackhawks fan. Everything else from there, sort of wheels fall off. Friday, you're up 2-0. Was really excited to see them string 2 wins together. Obviously, doesn't happen. And then there's really not much to write home about in Sunday or Mondays back to back there. I don't know if I even want to touch that with a 10-foot pole because we're back now to the bad. But it started out really fun. I think there's a lot of positive takeaways, even though it feels so long ago that Wednesday's game took place, but that's the kind of product. And here's my final takeaway, initial takeaway from this. I'm sure we're going to dig in a little bit more, but that's the kind of product you want to put on the ice in front of the home fans on a Friday night type atmosphere at the UC. I think the Hawks coming out, beating a better opponent, and putting on a fun night of hockey is really beneficial long term. But everything else from that on, as this episode is aptly titled, was pretty bad. So, Ron, what were your thoughts on this stretch of games?
I think you put it perfectly, right? Things were fun. Wednesday's game felt like a breath of fresh air for this Hawks team. They come in after a couple of days off, take care of business against a far superior Dallas Stars team on paper. Sure, it's against their backup goaltender, whatever, doesn't matter. It's still a really good Dallas Stars team. They take care of business. Taylor Hall, a guy who's struggled offensively over the course of most of the season, gets
Healthy scratch guy.
Yeah, healthy scratch guy at times this year. You see Connor Bedard get off the schneid. You see Crevier get involved in I believe that was his first game that he dressed for of the season, Tony. It was a good outing and exactly what they needed before the holiday. And it looked like things were going to carry over into Minnesota. 2-0 start, Ryan Donato with a pair of goals in that one. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about Mr. Donato a hair later, but then things just fell off the wagon, Tony. And my biggest takeaway from this, and we've got some other notes that we're probably going to touch on here as well. But what I noticed during this 4-game stretch, the key was they would start well, or they would do something good, right? They'd score, and then whoever they're playing immediately responds. It's not even 4 minutes later, 5 minutes. It's like
right
a
away.
minute later most of the times, right? It's right away. I don't know what it is about this team just getting comfortable after scoring a goal, just not being focused maybe after putting one in the back.
A lot of people online, Ron, are saying it's the coaching.
And maybe at this point, some of it is, but it's also on the players too, right? The coach can't go out on the ice and skate around for them. They have to respond. They have to come ready to play at every fucking minute of the game. And they haven't done that in these last few games. That Columbus game is a perfect example. Offensively, they were absolutely good enough to do things. They were 3 for 5 on the power play. Special teams over the course of this 4-game stretch, pretty good, Tony. 3 for 4 on the PK on Wednesday night against Dallas, 2 for 2 in Minnesota, 2 for 2 against Columbus, and 2 for 2 against Toronto. The PK is not the problem. Even the power play has been scoring. 1 for 2 against Dallas, 1 for 3 against Minnesota, 3 for 5 against Columbus. 0 for 4 on Monday night was the first time they haven't scored a power play goal in the last 3 games. That's fantastic. But it's just letting the other team immediately come back and just it zaps momentum. Zaps momentum, Tony. And when they don't have anything going right for them, it's hard to get motivated as a hockey team on the ice when you score a goal and then 45 seconds later, your opponent puts one in the back of the net to even it up, to take the lead, to extend their lead, whatever it is, right? The Hawks try to chip away, only for the other team to come back and take away all that progress that they made.
Yeah, but you were seeing this over and over and over again. And that's what's concerning. Like there's been a real issue for this team to take control of a game. And that's what made Wednesday against Dallas sort of feel maybe not like you were completely in control until about the third was where I felt like we got maybe like 5-6 minutes into the third period. And you're like, okay, the other shoe here is not going to drop. There's not going to be this comeback mounted against the Hawks, and you could start to have fun with it. But everything so far this year has felt stressful. There never seems to be that sustained momentum where you're able to put teams away. And I believe that was a question that was asked. I think it was to Foligno earlier this week, like actually putting teams away. They've really struggled to do that, even in games where, and I think the Toronto game at the end of this trip as well here, or at least at the end of the segment of games that we're talking about, you saw them control play for a considerable amount of time in this game. They weren't able to get the job done. They weren't able to take that to the next level. And so it just feels like there's always a door open for every opponent that they play to make their way back into a game or to close that gap on whatever the Hawks are trying to press in. And I talked with Johnny about this on the last show. The chip and chase rates for the Hawks, absolutely horrendous. There's Wednesday's game, and I go back to it against Dallas one more time. It was the only time where you really felt like there was sustained pressure that actually led to goals. Toronto was the exact opposite of it. It was like you can work your offense, but you're not being rewarded for it. And that gets disheartening over and over again. I think that lends some credence to what you were just saying there. They're just not able to take control of a game puck drop to the last whistle, and that's a real problem. They're not going to win a lot of games that way.
Indeed, and Tony, I think it kind of plays along the same, right? Not being able to close. We have our games they'll want back tracker, and we've
Take all the
referenced
coffee out of the Blackhawks locker room. Coffee is for closers. They do not deserve any more coffee.
No, that they do not. Games they'll want back. We're already up to 7 games. And that doesn't even include December 1st.
There's some on there that have not been recorded that they could have been in.
Absolutely.
And what does that record look like if you put, I don't know, 5 out of the 7 or 4 out of the 7 in there? It looks a whole lot better.
I was just saying, let's call it 5 out of the 7. If you flip that record, instead of 8-15-2, you are what, 13-10-2?
Yeah.
That looks a whole lot different, especially on a team that is supposed to be taking kind of that next step in this season, right? You added more talent, you spent some money in free agency. You tried to make it in a sense of like where they
tried to be more competitive, just a little bit more competitive.
And they really haven't been at times,
But then you look at that number though, Ron, if you look at that number and
Sure.
it is flipped because some of these were, games that they were in, puck luck sort of ties into it a little bit there. But also just that ability to take control of the game. They're missing one little gear there. Either way, if your record right now is, what did you say? 13-10?
13-10-2.
I think people are a whole lot more amped up on this Blackhawks rebuild right now than people sitting here talking about firing Luke Richardson. I think there's not many people who are worried about Connor Bedard. You've got an above 500 record somewhat there, at least in the win-loss. I know the overtime games are going to be there, but I think you're not as panicked right now if you're a Hawks fan, if you get some of those games that are on the ones they wish they had backlist.
100%.
And as this continues to go this season, they're going to be in games. So are they more competitive? I think so. There's just nothing to show for it. Unfortunately, in the National Hockey League, we don't count losses for any points.
Right. And that's where a lot, I think, of the concern lies, right? Is, well, if we can't, if the Blackhawks can't close games, like you said, how much are you really benefiting from? There's nothing, like you said, there's nothing to show for it. Yeah, silver linings are cool and tough sometimes, very rarely, if you ask Johnny Nani.
If I hear Darren Pang end a broadcast with like, I'm not big on silver linings, but there was a lot to play. I've heard that line at least 3 times so far this season.
And that's where the struggle comes. Now, granted, there is absolutely an opportunity where this Blackhawks team come late December into January and February starts playing better hockey, and maybe our tune does change a little bit. But we're still going to look back in this stretch of games, especially right now, where, like you said, they had that opportunity against Toronto. They controlled most of play in that second period, which is crucial, especially when you have the long change. They controlled play against Dallas. They controlled, at least the first period and a half against Minnesota, realistically. And again, that's not even all the other games that we've already talked ad nauseum about that they were in and had chances. You're going to still look back at those and go, son of a bitch, like, what if they did get a couple of those? Like you said, like what if a couple of them were finished out? And Tone, a couple of other takeaways that both Johnny noted, and I know there's something that you want to dive into a little bit here as well. Bertuzzi seems to be settling in 3 points in this last grouping of 4. He went pointless in the last 2 games, with 2 assists against Dallas, had an assist against Minnesota. Certainly want to see him start to settle in. We've seen him now with Connor Bedard. We've already talked about the positive Connor Bedard getting off the schneid. 2 goals in this recent stretch. He just looks like a more confident player again. And I think that's the real key for Connor Bedard, is just continuing to be confident. And I will say this when it comes to Connor Bedard and the positivity of him regaining his confidence. You're starting to see him at least make the plays again that you were like, ooh, that's Connor Bedard, right? Like the kind of the wow plays. You're starting to see those come back into his arsenal again. But I think it was really well put by Luke Richardson. I know a lot of people aren't going to like to hear this because, you got to fire Luke Richardson. I'm going to be the SpongeBob meme right now. But like he said, you're the second youngest player in the NHL and you have 19 points in what, 25 games? I think my maths. That's pretty good. Like, yeah, maybe we're all expecting Connor Bedard to be a 30 in 25 guy right now, but let's be real. Even the veteran talent that you brought in on this team, and I'm going to get into it a little bit more later, so I want to slow things down in terms of where I'm going with this, but you bring in a bunch of these veterans, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can keep up with a Connor Bedard, right? Just look at across the league some of the greatest superstars that play in this league. Not everybody could play with Jonathan Toews or Patrick Kane. It took special players to be able to play with those guys. It took a Brandon Saad or a Marian Hossa. It took an Artemi Panarin or an Alex DeBrincat. It took an Artem Anisimov having, a few really good seasons as Patrick Kane's center. And then you look at other teams around the league. Alexander Ovechkin played the greatest hockey of his career with Nicholas Backstrom. Sidney Crosby played some of the greatest hockey of his career with Chris Kunitz on his left wing, right? Like, you got to find that guy that knows how to play with elite talent. And sometimes just because they're veterans doesn't mean they know how to play with elite talent.
And this is, I hate to go here because, like, you're just opening up a whole Pandora's box for me right now, Ron. But this is why people have wanted Kyle Davidson to sort of say, fuck that cap space. I'm going to go acquire elite talent to play with Connor Bedard because that's what's going to benefit Connor Bedard the most is having someone that talented, that level tier player that you're talking about when you're saying, oh, it takes a special talent to play with Patrick Kane. Yes, they elevate guys up. We saw Connor Bedard elevate Philip Kurashev last season. This year, it hasn't worked out as such, but good players are supposed to drive other guys up. That's the problem right now that I see. And I can lend some credence to everybody who goes online and says, are you worried about Connor Bedard right now? Yes, a little bit, because it makes sense. I'm worried about him for the fact that he hasn't really raised the talent of anyone around him right now on the Chicago Blackhawks. Yes, the assists and stole it breezing with the comment, Ron. I don't know if you can hit that. He needs to be a little more selfish and shoot the puck on net. I think we've seen that a little bit over the course of the last few games. Assists are great, but the team needs goals. That's 100% where I'm going with this. Everybody on your line looks good when you're putting the puck in the back of the net. That's what's going to help. And I think, last year he had that connection with Philip Kurashev, but why not go out there this past offseason? And you've given the reason a couple of times as to, the rebuild is still, far along. All those reasons exist. And I give them all the weight in the world here. But on the same note, there is a subset here saying, when Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane stepped into the league, they had a guy like Patrick Sharp as well there. They had an established veteran who was a perennial, shooting threat at the time already. There's no Patrick Sharp on this team.
I think part of the problem with that argument, Tony, and I'm not calling you wrong, I'm just saying this is something that needs to be kept in mind, is Toews and Kane were at the back end of the rebuild. If you really consider the timeline of when they arrived in Chicago,
yes, they arrived
at the back end because you already had Brent Seabrook and Duncan Keith and Patrick Sharp and a Martin Havlat and a Brian Campbell with this team by the time Toews and Kane were up and becoming rookies. That rookie team that Toews and Kane had was far more talented than this current Blackhawks team. I think it hurts Connor Bedard in the sense that Connor Bedard's the beginning of the rebuild. So now you are saying, okay, well, we either have to either pay for these guys, like you're insisting, right? And supposedly, if you believe everything you read, Kyle Davidson tried to do that, kicking the tires with a guy like Jake Gensel. But then you also do have to develop the talent. And when your prized franchise player is the first piece of that puzzle, right? Because you could even make the argument with Connor McDavid.
I would make an argument that that's the most dangerous way to build the team in any professional sport. Because you don't have the building blocks around it. When you get a generational type talent on an entry-level contract in any sport, it'd be really nice for that to be sort of, if not your finishing piece, but sort of the piece that moves
closer to the end.
Yes. Right. And so what we're feeling right now is you got the generational piece, but everything else around, there's nothing else around it.
No.
You can argue that, Alex Vlasic is probably a piece to that, and I think he's
Definitely.
a really good hockey player. But like, if you remove Connor Bedard from the Chicago Blackhawks right now,
Horrific.
Everything here is beyond bad. It's the worst in the league, I think.
Yeah.
As far as what's at the NHL level and the time frame that it's going to take everything else to get there. So your only solution there is to spend frivolously. And I know you've made a ton of points against why that is the best course of action. And it probably is the riskiest course of action. However, it's not going to make people happy being in this sort of wait this out period, because by the time what people need to come to grasp with is by the time the Blackhawks are good, you're not going to be paying Connor Bedard chump change to play for this organization. No. And so the pieces that you're going to be able to bring in here are not going to be top tier as much money is on the books right now to spend on someone who's top tier, because most of that money is saved for things like
But here's where I will
backwards to build it. That's what makes this look worse than what it is.
And I will poke holes in your argument, because the Blackhawks did spend money, Tony. They just didn't spend it on the right pieces. That's
you
the
just
problem.
got done talking about this in the Cubs show.
Yes,
we got done talking about this with the White Sox before. You've done this on the Bears show before. It's the same thing.
But this is where you have this argument, because Tony, I look at their cap sheet right now and I go, well, you've got $40 million committed to your forward group, but amongst that forward group is $4.5 million for a 37-year-old Nick Foligno, or $6 million for a 33-year-old Taylor Hall, or $4 million for a 30-year-old third line Ilya Mikheyev. Right? Like, you're not paying a Martin Havlat type player right now, right? You're not paying those things. That's where it's hard. And you could even make the argument, well, what if they went and they spent on higher players? Sure. But the way the NHL free agency works nowadays, it's delicate, because we've seen guys get really bad contracts because that's just the market price. So at least the one thing if you're
old enough to remember Stan Bowman.
Oh yeah. The problem is right now you're probably looking at another year or two till they're really spending like on true top free agents. But the problem also is now, Tony, there's so few top free agents that make it to free agency. Most of these teams lock up the big key guys when they do, and then your free agency group.
But that's where, Ron, I'm going to come back and poke the hole here and say, why get rid of Alex DeBrincat? Why get rid of some of these guys who were here already to tear this down?
Connor Bedard would not have been in the equation, Tony, if any of those guys were here.
I know, but that's, again, is it a flawed process?
Sure.
We could wind up at the end of and this is a huge possibility, and people need to consider it. You could wind up at the end of Connor Bedard's tenure with the Chicago Blackhawks, and you might not have a Stanley Cup to show for it. It's not guaranteed.
Sure. Nothing's guaranteed.
And, what would you have rather had?
I don't know. But would you have rather had a middling team for the next decade too? That's what Stan Bowman was doing.
Oh no, I don't want that either.
Okay,
what I'm saying is,
that's
Kyle
my argument.
Davidson tore it down to the studs.
Sure, and because you had Alex DeBrincat and you had all those guys, and look what he did with some of those guys. Though he turned Kirby Dach into Frank Nazar. He turned Alex DeBrincat into Kevin Korchinski.
You were on the phone with me earlier today, and I just want everybody to hear this. Ron, what is your slogan on the prospects?
A prospect is a prospect until they're no longer a prospect.
Yes.
Sure.
That's what the Hawks have a ton of.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stolich says here, he says every shift promo, the coaches say, quote, where are the goals coming from? We're banking on Nazar, et cetera. How long does that take, if ever? Frank Nazar is having a really good AHL season. He's better than a point per game player, or at least at a point per game mark. There are going to be guys I do think they hit on here. Tony, I think the key is maybe we need to sit here and ask the question of, were Tyler Bertuzzi and Teuvo Teravainen the right players to spend over $5.5 million a year on? That,
Does
I
it
think, is the
matter?
better question.
But does it matter at this point?
It could matter.
But, okay, so my biggest problem with this is there were no expectations laid out at the start of this season. If you don't believe that Kyle Davidson, when he said, we're tired of being at the bottom, if that holds true, and we're evaluating this team, we're post Thanksgiving now, we're into December, and you're still at the bottom of the barrel, I think that warrants a conversation of accountability. What's gone wrong so far?
A lot.
Like a lot has gone wrong. So are you on pace or are you not? Because if we're on pace, and this is only, and I've seen people say this online, if this is year 3 of 5 and we've got a couple more seasons where things are going to be absolutely terrible, well, then Kyle Davidson needs to come out and say, well, I wasn't really intent on competing, and he's not going to do that. It's just not in his nature to come out and say, well, this has gone way worse than what, I had anticipated here, but there's also going to be no accountability. At some point, like, the game is going to catch up with you. You have to course correct something because it can't look that bad for that long. Now, winning cures everything, and we were just fresh off of talking about how many games this team has, and you're going to want that one back. Mm-hmm. If they can evaluate this from that level and come out and address, a media session and say, here's a bunch of examples of games that we were right in, things weren't, didn't fall our way, and we believe this is going to turn around. You should see a really strong second half from this team. If it doesn't start out that way, I mean, now you've passed the buck long enough, there has to be accountability. And that's where I see Richardson being on the hot seat somewhere along that line. You're going to have to gut some things that you can from this roster at the trade deadline, make some meaningful acquisitions, and roll from there. But as of right now, if you're a fan who's tuned in enough that you were, watching preseason hockey, watching these guys coming in, you know what they said before this season started, and that was they didn't want to be where they're at right now. And so it just doesn't match, it doesn't jive. And, where are we at in the rebuild? Hey, I miscalculated. I think this is going to take a little bit more. We've got a plan on, acquiring some things. We're going to be active this offseason. I think that's a real key. We're going to be active this offseason in the right way. But you already talked about, like, there's a couple of years on these deals on the guys that they made this past offseason. Teuvo Teravainen, Bertuzzi. You don't want those things to start clogging you up, man.
No, and I don't think they will, because in fairness, they're only, 10 million of that 40 million in your forward group. Like, there's a lot of other money in other places that comes off the books after next season. There's a ton of money that comes off. There's a ton of money that comes off the books after this season, if we're being entirely frank. Just between Andreas Athanasiou and Taylor Hall alone, that's almost $15 million. So there's money, or pardon me, almost $11 million. Like, there's money coming off the books. But it's just a matter of having the right pieces to even target in free agency. I would make the argument the Blackhawks got incredibly lucky that Marian Hossa made it to free agency when he did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? That's half of it. So
best free agent signing in Chicago sports history.
Easily.
Hands down.
I mean, I think there's a lot still to be said with the rebuild. I agree. I think the accountability thing is a big thing, and I have something on that for you a little bit later. So I'm gonna put a bookmark in our conversation here.
I know you were on the show last week, but I did bring up that it was, far too early to be talking about firing Luke Richardson last week on the show.
Oh, agreed.
I'm still in that camp. I think that there's things that can be worked out, but I do want to bring up the fact that, like, there does need to be accountability at some point. And I think that's where, we're starting to enter that time. And I'm poking around because I want to see where you're at with with this.
And we'll get there because we need to get to some other things before we get there. So we're going to put a bookmark in this and we're going to keep moving. I do want to give a couple of quick shout outs to the comment section here as well. We've had some people joining us earlier, dudes from our boy Skokes. Daniel Berry Sports Highlights joining us a little bit earlier. Matthew was in our comment section as well, showing some love and saying hello. Basolit said it here. He says, I give the Hawks brass credit. They have the stones to completely tear it down. The Bears would rather be in mediocrity or perpetuity. Then he says, count at least 5 games this year. The Hawks sleepwalk through the opening period. Same issue as last season. It's a coaching org problem when that continues to happen. And that will fuel my comments in a little bit here. But Tony, a couple other things here as well. Just some roster notes that we do need to touch on. Laurent Brossoit, another setback with him. Kind of unfortunate. Luckily, the Blackhawks have gotten pretty decent goaltending out of Peter Mrazek and Arvid Soderblom, albeit not elite goaltending, but better than expected, I think, from especially Soderblom, maybe not so much Mrazek. But Brossoit's right knee, he's still on the injured non-roster. He underwent another procedure, so it's at least another 6 weeks from that time period. At this point, we're probably seeing Brossoit post-Winter Classic at the earliest, is what my guess would be when it comes to him, as well as that Seth Jones and his right foot injury. He was placed on the IR. That was retroactive to November 14th, so we're still staring down the barrel. It's about a 4-week timeline from about November 20th when the news came out. So that puts him back right around kind of mid-December is probably where we're going to expect to see Seth Jones back on the Blackhawks blue line. So those are just some roster notes and updates. Tony, I know you wanted to talk about this. Johnny hates this segment because Johnny has no issues with CHSN. He's one of the lucky ones. You and I aren't so lucky, and I always feel like I'm a fish out of water talking about it with Johnny. I don't feel as much of a fish out of water with you because you are on the receiving end of my bitching and moaning usually about CHSN. So I know you've had the ability to properly set up your antenna. You've been able to get a clean feed. It's been great. But we've heard some of the antenna feedback. I have some of that. My antenna feed is fucking dog shit. I can't get this goddamn thing to work for the life of me. I've tried it in 17 different fucking places in connection with my television. I have it pointed at the city of Chicago. I have it everywhere. I have it nice and high. It has no obstructions. Things are great. And guess what? I can't get the games. I'm fucking annoyed. Quite frankly. And I don't want to download the fucking app. I just want them to figure this shit out. I don't care if it's more money at this point. You know what? Fuck it, Xfinity. Put them on the highest tier. Don't care. Because at least it's easier to just pay the cable bill for a couple extra bucks. Because I'll tell you what, Tone, the next time I try to fire up the game with the freaking antenna, if it doesn't work, I'm going to be sending you a picture of an antenna that just got thrown off the side of a tree in my backyard. Because that's where I'm about at right now.
At least film it if you're going to do that. For the content, for the people. I invite anybody in the comments right now to send in your tips to Ron Luce for how to set up the TV antenna. We'll see if we can get a good comment on some instructions for Ron to set up the antenna in his household. Ron, this is kind of insane to me that you can't get the signal, and I'm farther away than you, man. I'm all the way down here in Lockport, and you're off in Payless, so you're closer to the city. You should be able to get a better signal than I am.
You would think so. You would think so. And Stolit says here, if you have ESPN Plus, you can use a VPN and watch it that way. I don't have ESPN Plus because I don't have a ton of money to be able to.
These just sound like excuses
on ESPN Plus. Do you want to pay for my ESPN Plus, Tony?
Sure. We'll pay for Ron's ESPN Plus. Maybe we need some. Maybe
Tony's going to pay for my ESPN Plus and my VPN, and then we're going to be great. And then we're not going to have to.
We're gonna monetize this show, and we'll pay for Ron's ESPN Plus
to be able to view.
Yeah,
to watch the Blackhawks.
We can crowdfund it. It'll be great.
That we'll have to wait and see. But in terms of updates, it's kind of status quo.
I like this comment in here from Mine Skokes. Mine has a seizure every time a plane flies over, and I'm near O'Hare. Absolute nightmare. Skokes, you need to record that. If you can, somehow, it would make great content to put up on X or TikTok or whatever social media platform you want. Just you watching the game, plane flying over, and just the feed. I want to see what happens when a plane flies over.
Maybe it'll encourage CHSN to move their shit along a little faster too.
Yeah, just we need that type of content out there. They'll probably actually just tell you to pay the $30 for the app. But either way, I mean, it'd be funny. I have had no problems with CHSN at all. In fact, it comes in better than my Xfinity feed does. I might actually test this. I know we've got
crazy.
a game. I know we've got a game coming up here that's going to be on both TNT and CHSN. I'm going to try and get a good picture of it, and we'll see if I can capture it. I might just stay on the CHSN side because it's a much better picture. But there's been one other game so far this year where it was on my Xfinity cable, and the picture was just nothing compared to what I'm getting from an antenna. I can't wrap my head around it, but who knows? I just must be lucky. The funny part is, though, Ron, the funny part is I have tried to set another antenna up on multiple televisions in my home. It only works in my family room, and that's it. Every other place that I've tried to scan for the channel, I can't even get it.
It'd be that way. It'd be that way sometimes. Hey,
it's that random.
Yeah, it's been that random for me. So I kind of get it. I mean, it's been as random as like I moved the antenna like an inch over on the wall and it's completely different effect. So it's been a nightmare.
So you're not running a cord from your family room into your kitchen and putting it on the counter?
No. God, no.
Yeah, my wife loves the antenna on her kitchen counter. But
I'm sure she does.
Crystal clear picture
crystal
for our Blackhawks games.
Yeah, you can pat the antenna and tell it it's doing a good job every time you order your food from the nearest local establishment that you guys are grabbing for dinner.
It's fantastic.
Things
we have to do in 2024 to watch Blackhawks hockey.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Tone, let's get to some of our habitual segments here. We're going to start by ruffling some feathers. I will let you take the floor here, my friend. Talk to me.
All right. My ruffle the feathers comes courtesy of a comment made by Nick Foligno to Ben Pope in a story that was released earlier today. Nick Foligno believes that the Blackhawks should play more afternoon games so that the kids can watch instead of playing at 7:30 on a Wednesday night. I understand that Nick Foligno is a father. He wants to, introduce the game to young children and continue to pass on the hockey spirit. I think that's fantastic. But what the fuck are we talking about right here, right now, Ron? Hockey, sports in general are just better when it's 6, 7 o'clock at night. Bonus points if it's late night hockey. You want to be able to enjoy your beer, relax, watch the game, maybe even after the kids are in bed so that you can unwind after a long day of hard work and just enjoy your sports. I know our guy Pat Comiskey was in the OnTap Sportsnet Slack channels earlier today talking about how he loves the afternoon game. I don't know what Pat Comiskey does. I think he goes to bed at probably about 8 p.m. and he's in his 20s. It's just crazy to me. But Ron, who the hell wants to watch a hockey game at 2 p.m, especially if it's on a weekend? There's football on. It decreases the value of the product when you're going up against the NFL on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. It's not a smart scheduling decision. Hockey is better later at night. There's less competition for TV space. I think that appeals to a broader audience. I think Nick Foligno is just talking out of his ass here, and I'd kind of rather he focus on winning some more hockey games now that he's the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. It's just an off-kilter comment for me. I'd really want to get back to the de facto status that we had last year with Nick Foligno, and this one sort of comes out of left field. It's a hot take. I don't like it. I'm upset about it. And I think I'm just speaking for most hockey fans right now that don't want to watch games at 2 o'clock in the afternoon unless you're Patrick Comiskey because you've got a bedtime.
And I respect there are elements where it benefits. And mind you, Foligno suggested because of the kids. I think that is maybe a flawed
But was he talking about Pat Comiskey when he was referencing the kids?
Might have been. He might have been. Stolen says here, though, it's the only way he could get his mom to a game was for the matinee. They're going to the game on December 15th as a 2:00 start against the Islanders. So I do understand why they're doing it. I appreciate, to me, if you're going to play the afternoon games, like you said, right, from a diminishing of the product standpoint, I think playing them after the NFL slate is the best time to do this.
Yes. Stay out of football. There's no reason for the NHL and Gary Bettman to try and compete with it.
Yeah,
it's a dumb move.
It's going to hurt your product, right? Especially, think about it. You're talking about, well, more kids can watch then. What are the kids going to watch nowadays?
The kids are watching football.
Right. Exactly. The kids are watching football. That's why football continues to boom. That's why the fantasy football industry continues to boom. The hockey can't even hold a candle to that. So I agree. I see where the argument is both ways. I like the afternoon games for certain people, but it's not for everybody. And I certainly understand it's not for you, my friend. And I tend to lean that way as well. I like those good old 6:00 starts on Sunday nights. So not being able to enjoy those has been a little bit depressing. Tony, I'm going to ruffle some feathers. And I had this one teed up for last show, but unfortunate circumstances did not allow me to join you and Johnny pre the Thanksgiving holiday. The Hawks need more Patrick Maroons and Craig Smiths on the roster. And here's why I say that.
I like this.
Because
I don't know where it's going, but I like it.
Oh, I know you don't know where it's going, but you're going to like it. What do Patrick Maroon do and Craig Smith do that no other veteran on this roster does? Compliment a young player? Well, I think Lucas Reichel's been left on the fourth line all season because he's got chemistry with two older teammates who know where to be on the ice, do everything that they need to do in order to make sure their young player is successful, and execute on that. They play hard. They have a motor. Sure, I understand that Patrick Maroon and Craig Smith might not be the fastest guys in the NHL anymore, but you know what they do? They bust their ass shift to shift. You know what I don't see happening? The rest of this veteran overpaid leadership on the Blackhawks busting their ass. Tony, you want accountability? Everybody looks at the bench. How about the fucking guys on the ice making $4.5 million a year, wearing the captaincy, and they're more worried about 2:00 games than the fucking wins on the ice? Johnny said it here in his notes for us tonight. If last season was so unacceptable to Nick Foligno, why doesn't he step up in a meaningful way, shape, or form now that he's the captain? Where is this from Teuvo Teravainen? Where is this from even a guy like Jason Dickinson this year who has not had the same impact as he did a year ago? Still a great player. But where is this from Nick Foligno? Where is this from Tyler Bertuzzi? Where is this from all the guys you fucking invested to come in and compliment?
Get on Luke Richardson for this. Come on. Do it, Ron. You can do it.
No, and it's not on Luke Richardson because he can't skate for fucking Nick Foligno. He can't
tell him that it's unacceptable and do the same thing he did to Taylor Hall if he sees that shit.
Yeah.
The problem is that once you gave Nick Foligno that captain C on his jersey, you can't take him out of the lineup.
And I think that's the problem. You know what? If it were up to me, there wouldn't have been a captain, period. Leave him as the de facto for the
going back. We loved the move at the time. Both of us did, if I remember correctly. I know I did.
Tony, this is the problem. It's not a problem of, oh, Connor Bedard struggling. Oh, this, like, we have never seen a game where a Teuvo Teravainen or a Tyler Bertuzzi or a Nick Foligno or Ilya Mikheyev or any of these guys are coming.
There's a good question that just came in from a tomato. And
that question's going to have to hold on, Tony. I'm not done yet. None of them bust their ass the way Patrick Maroon and Craig Smith do. None of them do. And there's a reason we can look at that fourth line all season long. And Lucas Reichel is having a rather successful 2024-2025 campaign.
I think you're answering the question.
Because they are busting their ass. They're doing everything they're asked of, and they're doing something to help support a young player. And I have yet to fully see. You were talking about, well, why isn't Bedard propping up the teammates around him? Well, if these veterans were so important to the fucking rebuild, why aren't they doing the opposite for a young player? That's where my problem lives. That's where my problem lives when it's all said and done here. The Blackhawks need more Pat Maroons and Craig Smiths. Because guess what? They're actually propping up a young player right now on the roster that the rest of the top 6 and top 9 is not doing for Connor Bedard. That's what it is. How do you guys know if it's a lack of effort on the players? The eye test.
You just answered the question.
The eye test. Because I sat here. The game that this sparked the most was that Philadelphia game. Because I actually got to watch that game. Because my
I was going to say,
decided
was
to
it one that your
cooperate.
antenna worked for?
Yes, the one game of this whole year that my antenna has worked for. I got to sit down and watch it. And you know what happened in that game? The fourth line was the best line for either team on the ice the entire game. I didn't see Nick Foligno, Teuvo Teravainen, Taylor Hall, any of them do what Pat Maroon and Craig Smith were doing in that game. Or what, quite frankly, what they've done all season. Right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward here. And I'm even going to pull up some numbers for everybody at home. The only player I would argue...
do a fancy screen share? Should we do a
no fancy screen share right now. Think about this. Patrick Maroon and Craig Smith have nearly as many points as Nick Foligno, Taylor Hall, Tyler Bertuzzi. Lucas Reichel has 9 points in just 21 games. Craig Smith, 10 points in 23 games. You know who else has 10 points in 25 games? Tyler Bertuzzi. You know who has 10 points in 24 games? Taylor Hall. You know who has 10 points in 25 games? Nick Foligno. Sure, Teuvo Teravainen's got 12 points in 25 games, but guess what? 9 of those points came in like the first 5 games of the season. Like, what are we doing? Ryan Donato is the only player on this team that seems to give a flying fuck about putting the puck in the net besides Connor Bedard. The Blackhawks need more Patrick Maroons and Craig Smiths. And if you don't like it, good. Then my ruffle some feathers served its purpose. You want accountability? There's your accountability. It's not just the coaching staff. It's the players on the ice, too, that need to fucking execute. And all these heralded veterans that are so widely respected around the league aren't getting the fucking job done. Plain and simple. There's your accountability.
I think that's why there's been some unpopular healthy scratches, though, this year from that coaching staff.
Good. Send a message. Just because you're 33 and you've been in the league for 10 years doesn't mean shit. You said it, Tony, earlier in the show when we were talking about the record, right? The NHL is a results-based business. You're not getting the fucking job done. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's not what you did for me before. It's what are you doing for me right now? What have you done for me lately?
You're only as good as your last envelope.
They're not getting the job done. So that's my ruffle some feathers for tonight. I hope that fired everybody else up just the way it fired me up. That one's been built up for about 2 weeks now. So that one felt good to get out. I really need to get through that one. Tony, we'll turn it to some more positive things here. Some stick taps. Do you have stick taps to hand out?
I do. Got to give one to, I know this is an easy one just to pick off right away, but Connor Bedard for ending the goal drought. We talked about it on the last show. It's the longest he's ever gone, I think, in his hockey career without putting the puck in the back of the net. You like to see him overcome that. Looks a little bit better than he was during that stretch. Got to give a stick tap to Connor Bedard. We've got a tomato that just gave a stick tap as well too. But Ron, I'm going to let you go to yours. And if anybody else in the comments has stick taps, throw them in there right now so we can get to them after Ron's done.
Definitely do. I will get to Tomina Twos here first. He says, give it to stick tap to the magnificent Taylor Hall hat trick. That was a cool moment in the season. That saved Taylor Hall from a lot more probably anguish in my rant just now than it would have, because he's actually at 10 points with the likes of Craig Smith. But that is neither here nor there. I do want to address quickly before I get to stick taps. I'm going to address as much as we can. Tomina says, I think getting, quote, more players with effort is a remedy, not a cure. Seems like an organizational dysfunction. Sure, but when you're trying to develop young players in the rebuild right now, those veterans need to come in and help your young guys develop. Lucas Reichel has largely developed. Maybe he's not getting the puck luck that he would probably want to have, but he looks like a completely different hockey player. He looks confident. He's skating with speed. He's playing a two-way game, which we have never seen from him at the NHL level. He's doing all the right things, and that's going to benefit him in the long run. They're not getting that from the rest of the lineup, and I think that's the problem. Stola Breezing's had some good comments as well. I mentioned Maroon's speed. Sure, he is slow, but guess what? He's going balls to the walls, and he's helping a young player get better, and I'll take that 10 times out of 10 if this roster is going to lack in terms of talent. I am going to give stick taps, though. 2. I have 2 stick taps. One is for a player, and one is for the United Center crowd. Stick taps to the Blackout Wednesday crowd. That's what the United Center should sound like. That place was popping.
I agree.
On Wednesday night. And Taylor Hall had the all-time comment. The absolute all-time comment, all-time quote about everybody being lubed up and excited for Blackhawks hockey. And guess what? That plays. That gets people excited. And you saw it. Probably the best crowd of the season. We saw it, Tony, last year when we took in the Black Friday game against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
We did.
I'm still chasing that high from Kevin Korchinski's overtime winner.
That was
still haven't been able to find it. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Blackout Wednesday crowd was phenomenal. Good on them, and they got a damn good hockey game as a result of it. I'm happy for everybody that was in attendance. I'm bummed that you and I couldn't be in attendance for that one, Tony, even though, like you said earlier, we were supposed to. Awesome. Good shit. More of that from the United Center. And I think you're going to start to see the team play better because they can feed off that energy when they're at home. My honorable mention stick tap is for Ryan Donato. I think a lot of people are understating Ryan Donato's importance to the Blackhawks this year. 10 goals. He's been really good. Fun fact about Ryan Donato, his career high in goals is 16 in the season. In a contract year, Ryan Donato is 1,000% on pace for a nice payday if he keeps this up. He's on far beyond a 20-point pace, or 20-goal pace, pardon me. If he's able to have a 25, 27, maybe even 30-goal season this year, he's going to cash in, and it's probably not going to be with the Blackhawks, which is a shame because I'd love to see Ryan Donato remain in a Blackhawks uniform. But he's up to 10 goals after the 2 in Minnesota, wearing the Colby Caves tie, a good friend of his and former teammate who passed away too young. We have that story over for you at ontapsportsnet.com if you want to learn more about that. Good on Ryan Donato. He's playing really good hockey this year, and you got to appreciate it for what it is. A couple more stick taps here. The Luis Crevier career goal number 1. I think that's a great stick tap. Got to give credit where credit's due to the kid. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stoll it will be at the game tomorrow, and he is praying for a win. Tony, with that in mind, we got to get to our predictions tracker. What's on tap next? Well, the Blackhawks have 3 games on the upcoming slate between when we expect to be back on the airwaves. It will be a 6:30 tilt on Wednesday night against the Boston Bruins. That one is on TNT as well as the CHSN broadcast, as you noted a little bit earlier. On Saturday, excuse me. On Saturday, the Blackhawks will take on the Winnipeg Jets. That is also at home, as is tomorrow night's game against Boston. That is a 3:00 start. That'll be on CHSN as well. And then Monday, they start their little swing in New York. They will be at the Rangers on Monday. But they will follow it up with other metropolitan area games, including against the Islanders and Devils before they return home and ultimately play the Islanders again on the aforementioned 12-15 game that we talked to Stola Breezing about a little bit earlier. But we'll be back before those other 2 metropolitan area games. We'll see them after the Rangers game. Tony, 3 games coming up. How are they going to do? What's your prediction for this 3-game slate?
Well, first off, Ron, I have to address the fact that, Johnny and I just took the lead on you. Both got 3. You're sitting at 2. So I have to play this in the right way. And I feel somewhat at a disadvantage here, although just as in golf, I guess the winner tees off first of the last hole. So I'll take a stab at this one. Boston, Winnipeg, the Rangers. I am going to go with a 2-1 stretch here. 2-1. I think they're going to be able to squeeze one out in Boston, maybe. I know it doesn't matter in our standings here, but I'm going to go 2-1, Boston, Winnipeg, Rangers. I think there's got to be a win here just based on the trends coming soon and then maybe trying to sneak another one out. I'm going a little bit more optimistic this week than I was last week with this. The luck has to change at some point. 2-1, and I'm hoping you don't copy me because Johnny copied me last week. We both wound up with the point. But you're free to do what you want. I'm just saying, if you also feel 2-1, I'm sorry for stealing the thunder there.
You're not stealing any of my thunder because I am not at all following you on this.
Go different. You're going to get cute with that Nata and overtime game.
No overtime this week. No, as much as I'd love to think they're going to go to overtime with Winnipeg, because if there's any team in the league, it seems like they go to overtime with, it's Winnipeg. Damn it, you're going to convince me to think that Winnipeg game is going to be an overtime loss, but I'm not going to buy into it. Tony, I'm going to take a page out of the negative Nani playbook.
Ooh, boy.
The Blackhawks in these next 3 games are going 0-3. They have not played good hockey over the last 2 games. They are playing, despite Boston having a down season, they're still a far more complete hockey team than the Blackhawks are. The Winnipeg Jets are one of the best teams in hockey. And the New York Rangers are a dangerous team. And we all get to see Artemi Panarin again skating around in a different uniform. I think the Blackhawks, are going to be competitive, especially in the Boston game, because I think the Boston's the worst of the 3 teams they play.
They're going through it right now in Boston.
They are, but not nearly as bad as we are in Chicago. And for that reason,
not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
So 0-3-0 is my record prediction coming up here. And when the negativity pays off and I tie you guys at 3 points apiece, I will be pleasantly surprised.
So what do we do? What do we do in the standing? Is there no points awarded if they go 1-2 or?
Correct. No points awarded if they go 1-2. Everybody stays clean sheet.
But if they go 3-0, I get the point there, correct?
No. They go 3-0, nobody gets a point.
We're gonna have to review what the rules officially.
I'm telling you what
I was closest to the pin.
We haven't done closest to the pin. Everything's been exact.
We did. No, the first point was awarded to me closest to the pin.
Oh, well, I wasn't on the first show of predictions, and then that was a flaw because Johnny has said
that's why I took the 2-1. I felt like it was going to split the middle there.
We gotta reevaluate.
That means if there's an overtime loss, you're probably going to get it.
I think we need to reevaluate the rules because we don't have as many points as we do shows so far this year, Tony. That's why.
I don't. Maybe I'm just wrong in my assessment.
We'll have to talk to our third council member here, Mr. Jonathan Nani, on how we're going to score this. But Johnny does not get a
week under protest.
Playing this week under protest. Johnny Nani does not get a prediction, as he notes. If you're not on the show, you don't get to make predictions. Johnny doesn't get one. So, Tony, you could take the lead this week and get that ever elusive 4th point. That would be certainly a big one. I am going for my 3rd point with my predictions here. Tony, we already talked about.
You predict me. Okay, so I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Just while you're here. If the Blackhawks are trailing by 1 goal or tied entering a 3rd period, will you ride with me on the Hawks money line bet, knowing that it's going to sacrifice a point for you if it cashes?
Tony, let me put it this way. As much as I love our Four Feathers show and I love our predictions of records, I will always bet the live money line over any records.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Those are simply for flex, but if we're cashing in for dough and a Blackhawks win, I will always ride with you, my friend. That will not change at all. A couple quick comments here from Stolet before we get out of here. Jets need win bad after a losing streak. Rangers suck. He says he can see 2 wins. Hawks are plus 130 home dogs tomorrow. And he says Bruins are on a back-to-back, and they just went to OT tonight. It's all things to consider.
Let's go Stolet breezing.
I would love to be wrong. When I am negative, I love being wrong. It's my favorite thing in the world. But I'm going to be a negative Nani, so that way I never get up for the letdown, and we continue to keep moving. That's how we're going to treat this one.
That way everybody's a winner.
That way everybody is a winner. Tony, any quick final thoughts before we fully wrap this thing up?
Ron, is fantastic talking some Blackhawks hockey with you. I think we got to some good points. I think that there's going to be a large, lengthy, healthy discussion about a couple of points that you and I are going to need to go back and forth on in the after show here. But again, my friend, always great talking Blackhawks hockey with you. Hope everybody who tuned in enjoyed it. We're going to have to get you an ESPN Plus subscription, Ron, so you can tune into some of these games and watch some Blackhawks hockey. But hoping to see you back at the UC quite soon, my friend.
Indeed. I am currently eyeballing the aforementioned game on the 15th. As a matter of fact, they might dabble in some daytime hockey for the first time this year. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to make it to Saturday's game. I know we have tickets for the Saturday game. I will not be there myself, but I'm eyeballing that 15th game. I'm really hoping to be in attendance for that one. Tony, I agree. It was great being back on the microphone with you talking Blackhawks hockey. We had a great crowd here tonight. Appreciate everybody in the comment section joining us here tonight, helping fuel the conversation here at the Four Feathers podcast. This was season 6, episode 10. And despite some familiar futility and a post-Thanksgiving stuffing of the Blackhawks, we're hoping for brighter and more beautiful days in the next 3 games before we see you guys on the microphone again very soon. Tony, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.